All right, welcome back to another experience of the Mike Farrell Sports Show. My name is Adam Eaton, and as always, the godfather of recruiting himself, Mr. Mike Farrell, joins me again. Mike, first off, hope you're having a great week. Thanks for hopping into your own show, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a busy week. There's a lot of things going on with NIL influencing recruits, 5-star recruits making decisions, and it's June. So it's slow for college football, but it's very, very, very hot for commitments and recruiting.
We'll cover it all here, Mike. Like you said, a couple of commitments today we'll go through. You've gotten into the list game, so we're gonna go over some of your recent lists that have raised some eyebrows on the interwebs. But do us a favor, if you're listening to us, make sure you're subscribing to all the stuff we're doing around here. Find us on Twitter, Instagram at Farrell Sport. Make sure you check out that YouTube channel as well. Mike's posting a bunch of videos you're gonna want to check out there. Obviously, the Believe Podcast Network. If you haven't subscribed to that, do all that stuff. Mike's got a lot of stuff he's building. He's a busy man. He has no time for decorations at his house because he's too busy building out this new empire. So make sure you give him a follow.
Tomorrow. The backdrop's coming tomorrow. So finally there'll be something behind me except for what's that? That's bubbly and Bang energy drinks and dog food.
Can we get a sneak preview of what it is, Mike? Can listeners guess? If they guess correctly, you got like something you can give away?
It's pretty obvious. I'm a big helmet guy, so it's going to be, cabinets with helmets. That's it. Okay. I had no place to put them when I moved. So, the helmet business is dying, which is funny because it ties into NIL. But I bought them at the wrong time. I invested in helmets at the wrong time.
Helmets and Bitcoin are all dropping at the same time. What is this world coming to, Mike? The Live Tour is taking over. Bitcoin's in the can, and helmets, you can't find them anywhere. But
Trevor Lawrence lost most of his signing bonus already in crypto. Yeah, I read.
It's a tough one. He should subscribe to Mike Farrell Sports whenever that comes up to get some of that stuff in advance. And Mike, all that stuff changes. One thing that doesn't change is Ohio State recruiting wide receivers. Two names to know: Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, have both now declared to Ohio State. You've been on social media talking about nobody does it better than Ohio State. How is this possible? How do they keep pulling these 4 5-star receivers out of states outside of Ohio, all over the nation, to come to Ohio State?
It's becoming embarrassing when it comes to riches because people forget about Julian Fleming, who's on the roster, who was the number 1 wide receiver in I forget what class it was, probably 2020. And people are already writing him off because Jackson Smith-Njigba is so good. And, he was a 5-star from Texas. And before that, obviously, Garrett Wilson from Texas. Chris Olave was a 3-star from California that they put into the first round. Ryan Day's system, great for wide receivers. Ryan Day was a wide receiver coach when he first got into things at Boston College, and he just knows how to recruit. He knows how to land great players. And on the roster itself, you get Emeka Egbuka from Washington, who's a 5-star kid, Marvin Harrison Jr., who probably should have been a 5-star kid, and now you've got these 2 guys in the 2023 class. Both of them. Carnell Tate was always interested in Ohio State and considered a lean. There was some other discussion of Tennessee, Notre Dame, some other schools. And, of course, Alabama is always in the mix. But Brandon Ennis was a lock for Oklahoma, then USC with Lincoln Riley there. And then all of a sudden, he falls in love with Ohio State, decides to go there with a fellow 5-star wide receiver. And he's just going to be – these 2 guys are just going to be the next ones that keep it going. So – Alabama was the best, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, obviously Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, but they've been surpassed. Ohio State is now number 1 when it comes to recruiting wide receivers in the country.
I'm going to ask a silly question. Feel free to laugh at me if you'd like to. Does Ohio State have too many receivers? I mean, there's only 1 ball to go around. They got a lot of talent in that locker room. Do they almost have too many at this point?
Well, Brian Hartline does a great job of distributing the football and coaching up the wide receivers and also keeping them in the program. Julian Fleming is a guy that I had heard wanted to transfer after his freshman year. Then I heard he wanted to transfer after last year. And, they've talked to him about waiting your turn and, just sort of giving everything a chance to play out. And this year he's supposed to be wide receiver number 2 to Smith-Njigba. Different type of receiver, big guy on the outside, slot guy is Njigba, who can play outside, but mostly can do a lot of damage on single coverage against inside defenders. We'll see. I mean, you can't have 8 5-star wide receivers because you got Egbuka now and you got Harrison, you got others. They moved one guy to tight end because he's a little bit bigger. And it's just one of those things where keeping all the pieces together with the transfer portal being there, it's not going to they're not going to keep everybody. Right. One of these 2 guys could transfer, or Fleming could transfer, or, who knows? I mean, Egbuka could transfer. You just don't know with the portal, but it's a really, really good problem to have. And they don't shoot for mediocre. I mean, they don't care. They want the best receivers coming there, and those guys push each other and will compete. And that's kind of the selling point. And Brian Hartline is a elite recruiter.
Mike, do you think either of these guys are a flip risk? Obviously, these are verbal commits, right? It's kind of like the old Seinfeld thing. You can take all the reservations you want, but they don't count till they're on paper. Either of these 2 guys a flip risk in your opinion? If so, which one?
Could be. I don't know. I would say they're both probably solid to Ohio State. I mean, why would they not be? They aren't. Carnell Tate's probably more locked in. I would say Brandon Ennis is a Florida kid. Again, was linked to multiple programs, Oklahoma, USC, and others in the Southeast. They're going to come after him and continue to recruit him. So I would say he's the guy that, maybe you look at potential flip watch down the line. But I think these 2 have talked. They decided they want to go to school together. And I really don't think you're going to shake them off of that because, listen, kids want 2 things. They want to go to the NFL and they want NIL. And Ohio State has NIL, and the way they're putting receivers out in the NFL, it's really hard to compete with. And Alabama can compete that way. Clemson, Justin Ross didn't get hurt. He was going to be a first rounder. His trajectory of career was first round until he got injured. T. Higgins is doing great. They've got Ngata there. They recruit 5-star wide receivers and high 4-stars as well. But there aren't as many options out there for elite wide receivers to go and know you're going to catch a ton of balls and be developed for the NFL. And that's why I think both of them stick with Ohio State.
Well, you mentioned 3 there. You mentioned Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson. Who rounds out that top 5? Who are the other 2 programs that you think are perennially a program that's going after and getting these top receivers?
I'm going to say USC because Lincoln Riley's there now. I would answer Oklahoma because I think they've done a really good job, with CeeDee Lamb and Mims and some of the other guys that they put out there, Hollywood Brown. But now, that Lincoln Riley's over there, I think USC is going to be that program. Jordan Addison is a clear example of that, transferring from Pitt to USC. So I think, it can't really say they've done it. Amon-Ra St. Brown was drafted lower than he should have been and had a great rookie season. Drake London's a first rounder last year. So they've had guys, but I think they're going to really take the next step. And then after that, it's kind of tough. You think about great offenses, you think about programs that could produce. I'm going to say Ole Miss. DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and the talent that Lane Kiffin is putting together there at wide receiver. Their defense is the problem. The offense is not going to be, and they're just going to keep churning out great wide receiver after great wide receiver. Obviously, I think those programs just have a first or second rounder every year.
How much does quarterback stability play a role in this? Those same programs, if you want to look at a common thread, right? They have really good quarterback play. Clemson, I guess, is the only one with DJ Uiagalelei, who's been a little bit up and down of late. But all those other programs you mentioned have great quarterbacks now and great quarterbacks in the pipeline. How much do you think that impacts the receivers if they want to know they're getting a great quarterback, a 5-star quarterback to throw them the football?
Yeah, and Clemson will be fine too. I mean, obviously, that was a down year offensively. He didn't develop the way we expected him to. We'll see how he bounces back this year. But if he doesn't do the job, they're going to bring in Cade Klubnik, and he's going to be the guy. And Deshaun Watson to Trevor Lawrence, it's a really good program when you look at kids making their decisions. And DJ was obviously a 5-star top 2 player in the country. But quarterback play is extremely important. But I think it's more offensive scheme. I think it's more you don't see these guys going to Georgia because Georgia is more of a balanced, running program, pro style offense, and haven't really produced those great quarterbacks. Whereas, it's sort of pinball numbers at these other places. And, when you look at Lincoln Riley and the Heisman Trophy winners, Baker Mayfield, and obviously Kyler Murray, he's proven that he's going to produce not only quarterbacks that are going to put up big numbers, but wide receivers as well. So the kids look at the system. Yes, Dwayne Haskins, obviously, rest in peace, didn't light up the world in the NFL, but had a great season at Ohio State. C.J. Stroud last year, great season. He's going to have another great season. But, man, I forgot LSU. I guess I got to put LSU in there instead of Ole Miss. I mean, I have to. I mean, Jamar Chase, and it's just
your show, Mike. You can do whatever you want.
Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. So yeah, and Keyshawn Butte at LSU. Yeah, I apologize to LSU fans. I'm going to put Ole Miss sixth, and I'm going to put LSU in there. And the whole wide receiver U thing is always very interesting. DBU is always very interesting, and it's very cyclical. But I don't know. It's hard to compete with what LSU has done. And the reason I mentioned LSU is because I've been thinking about Ohio State quarterbacks and, Joe Burrow transferring from Ohio State being the best quarterback that Ohio State had in their system, and he didn't even play there. It's like an embarrassment of riches offensively. And that's what's going to lead to national titles. I mean, defense can win a national title, as we saw with Georgia, but it's very rare. It's these offenses like Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State that are going to win the national titles. And I was just on a podcast yesterday saying Ohio State's the only team up north that can win a national championship. And then the next day they get 2 5-star wide receivers. And that's why they can recruit nationally. Urban Meyer set it up, and Ryan Day is sort of hitting it out of the park.
Mike, I don't know how often you get surprised, but a lot of eyebrows were raised over the weekend when the news of Ruben Owens to Louisville broke. Was that surprising to you, first off? Was that when you heard that, or someone kind of got in your ear with that? How surprised were you?
No, it was very surprising to me because, when I was told a month ago that he was going to take an official visit to Louisville, I was a little bit, okay, that's interesting. He's been linked to many other schools. Texas, especially recently. And I'm like, okay, he's interested in Louisville. What's going on there? And I will tell you, I think it's the quarterback. I think the guy they've got coming in there at quarterback, obviously his last name is Clarkson. He's got that name. I think they're selling offense. And I think also NIL, there's talking about a $3 million deal, for Ruben Owens. I don't believe any of these numbers. I don't know how Louisville could promise him a $3 million deal, or how boosters have enough to do that and compete with the Texases of the world and all those other ones that have huge booster. But Pierce Clarkson, sorry, it's like Clarkson Pearson. Pierce Clarkson, the 2023 commitment he's the best recruiter in this 2023 class. So it's surprising to me, but I think people are underestimating how much he means to that program and how much the last name Clarkson means to that program. Now, it could all change. I mean, they could have a crap year, and Satterfield could be under fire, and Ruben Owens could certainly decommit. I mean, he's on decommitment watch. He tweeted out he's not taking any other visits to any place but Louisville. Okay, well, I don't believe that for a second if Louisville doesn't show success. And I don't know behind the scenes how much money is. I'm going to dig into that and find out. But these $8 million numbers, these $3 million numbers, I don't believe any of them. I just think that Clarkson and the recruiting staff that they've put together at Louisville, they've made some great additions. Really, he's kind of smart because he's going to a place where he can be the guy. He can be the guy. And they've produce low key some very talented offensive players at Louisville. And it's sort of like the big fish, small pond situation, whereas elsewhere he might not be the focus. So surprising, but maybe a smart move.
You're well connected, obviously, across college football. What were you hearing back from coaches, sources, scouts when this announcement hit? What was the overall reaction you heard from kind of the at-large college football community?
Everybody was shocked. A 5-star running back going to Louisville, it just doesn't happen. I was trying to think of guys that have committed, 5-star guys that have committed to Louisville and Kentucky over the years, and there's been less than 5. And Louisville, in my mind, has never gotten a 5-star running back. Michael Bush 100 years ago was a very, very talented kid, but if I remember correctly, he was not a 5-star; he's a 4-star. It just doesn't happen. So there was a lot of surprise, but there's also a lot of people saying, "Oh, yeah, we'll see," or they bought him. And that's going to happen forever with NIL now. The recruiting efforts of these programs, first of all, getting Reuben Owens to take an official visit to Louisville is amazing. It's a tremendous recruiting job. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get that type of caliber kid up to Louisville. Then to close them is a big deal. And then everybody's just sort of saying, well, they bought him. It undermines the efforts of the assistant coaches and all the people behind the scenes who have worked on this and tried to make them comfortable in this decision. And then you're going to see national championships. If Lincoln Riley wins a national championship at USC, they're going to say, well, he couldn't do it at Oklahoma. NIL came in, and now he could do it at USC. And it's all because he bought players. He bought Jordan Addison. He bought, Caleb Williams. He bought all these guys. And the same thing with, Texas A&M and others that haven't broken through, and coaches like that are breaking through at different programs. It's kind of insulting, but that's what I heard. The first thing was shock, then he'll decommit, and then they bought him.
Yeah. Who are the programs you expect to stay in the mix here? You said he's already on decommit watch, not fewer than 72 hours into his Louisville tenure. Who are the programs you expect to kind of stay in there and try to play the long game and see if he'll pop loose towards the end?
Yeah, he's an interesting one because he's had so many different schools be involved. I honestly think, certainly Texas is going to be in there. Oklahoma, some of those programs, he's from Texas. Some of the programs in that area regionally will make a strong push for him. Those two programs are moving to the SEC. They're going to sell. Obviously, Bijan Robinson is going to be a big selling point for Texas. Texas A&M, I think, will be involved as well. If I look for him to make a decision to decommit, I think it's going to be convincing him to stay closer to home. And I think the selling point is going to be, look at Quinn Ewers. He left Texas, went to Ohio State, came back. Why did he come back? Because he could make more money here. And that's going to be the first pitch, I think, that anybody makes towards him. So it's just started. He had been committed to Texas. They're still involved. Now it's hold on to him. It's a great splash in June for Louisville. And it's a big win when there's no wins to be had on the football field. But now you got to hold on with all your might and try to keep everybody. And these guys aren't going to come in June 21st and 22nd and say, "Oh, Reuben, change your mind." They're going to chill. They're going to continue to stay in touch with them. They're going to see how the season goes. And then in November and early December, they're going to hammer him. And he's going to be, blown up by everybody saying, now with the early signing period coming up, you got to change your mind. This is ridiculous. This is crazy. And that's the smart strategy to take when you're trying to flip somebody. Don't try to flip him, 2 days after his commitment when he's all excited. Try to flip him, when it's been 6 months and maybe he's tired of everybody else getting the attention because he's committed and some others aren't. And, maybe Louisville didn't have a good season. That's what you do. And so they're going to have to really fight to hang on to him, I think.
Is there a school out there or maybe a coach that you're comfortable naming that has mastered the art of the flip, mastered the art of getting the kid at the very end after he's been committed? Is there a school or a coach that comes to mind?
Urban Meyer did. He was a flip master to me. He's not in coaching anymore. Flips are, obviously Saban comes to mind. Kirby Smart comes to mind. A lot of these guys, the power programs, it's changed with the December signing period, though. Back when it was one signing day in February, the flip was sort of it was an art form because you didn't have to do it in December or January. You could sort of wait and get that January official and have the kid come in and then flip them on signing day or before signing day or whatever. Now with the early signing period and so much occurring, Whereas the early signing period butts up to the season, and there's less opportunity during the season to recruit these kids, and they can take official visits in the spring. So sometimes by the time the season comes around, they've got 1 or 2 left. Right, where the old days was 5 official visits and you couldn't take them until your senior season started. It's all different. So flipping has become a different strategy. But I would say like the old school best flipper I've ever seen was Urban Meyer, and the best closer I've ever seen, and that includes Saban as well, because there was that one year where Urban Meyer retired because of health problems at Florida, and then came back a month later. And he still put together one of the best recruiting classes in the history of the world. And he closed on guys like Sharif Floyd and Dominic Easley. And each one of them had a different story as to what he was selling. He sold Sharif Floyd. He saw him playing in Florida in a dream. Dominic Easley, there was another pitch. And Urban Meyer was just so creative with that stuff that if you tried to flip him away, you couldn't. And if he wanted to flip somebody, you did not want him in your living room.
All right. Well, eyebrows were raised over Reuben Owens, but an eyebrow also went up over this headline too. I'm putting on screen now. Will Randall, tight end to Texas. I know what you're thinking out there. Mike Farrell is dialed into the tight ends. There's nothing you expect more than tight end recruiting coverage. But, Mike, this is a tad significant, particularly if you want to be a conspiracy theorist. Can you tell us why Will Randall, the tight end, is A, getting talked about on the Mike Farrell Sports Show, and B, the significance that might have?
He goes to Isidore Newman, and he's great friends with Arch Manning, and he's his favorite target. So this was back a year ago when the Arch Manning mania was just starting. There were a lot of people in the NIL world trying to figure out a way to get to him, because Cooper, his dad, is loaded, and obviously the uncles are loaded, and they're just not easy people to get in with. So I had a few discussions with schools that were trying to figure out who the player was that they could get in with, who is tied to Arch the most. And Will Randall came up a couple times. Now, with NIL, it didn't matter, because Will Randall, to my knowledge, doesn't need NIL money as well. A lot of people at Isidore Newman don't need money. Okay, it's similar to Oaks Christian out in California. There's a lot of celebrity or rich folks that send their kids there, but kids want to play with their friends, and they like that connection on the college level. So it raised eyebrows because Arch took his visit that weekend. His teammate commits. He's been a Texas lean for a while. Georgia has been a lean at one point, and then Texas, and it's been between those two for the most part. So when this kid commits, you sort of connect the dots, and you're like, you got to put 2 and 2 together and say Arch is going to go there. I don't know when Arch is going to announce his decision. I don't know if it's going to be June. I don't know if he's going to wait till December. But this is a very, very good sign for Texas. And, tight ends, Eric Gilbert and Michael Mayer, guys like that who were heavily recruited, Darnell Washington at Georgia, they make headlines, but only the elite ones. Will Randall is not an elite tight end, but he's tied into Arch. And so Texas fans looked at that and they're like, this is good.
I don't want to besmirch the good name of Will Randall. Is he a quality, solid player? I don't know much about Will. Is he a good prospect?
He is. He's sort of like, to me, between that big wide receiver and that pass catching tight end. That's who he is to me. He's not going to jump off the page like some of the others that I've seen over the years, some of the athletic freaks of the world or some of the biggest tight ends in the world, but he's certainly a caliber, FBS caliber football player. Is he Texas level without Arch? Probably not. But he can hold his own. Let's put it that way.
I mean, they had to know this was coming, right? When he commits there, they had to know this sort of conspiracy theory firestorm was coming. What does that say to you about maybe where Arch is at? I know you said lean Texas. They have to suspect that if this happens, guys like you and I are going to get on the internet and talk about it. What does this, I guess, signal to you that Will Randall is willing to commit so early, obviously with that connection to Arch?
Yeah, it's interesting because usually, sometimes you see the pieces fall together very quickly. Usually if you see a teammate of somebody or a sibling, of somebody committing, then you're like, okay, the next shoe is going to drop, and the guy we expected, to follow up that commitment will do so. And it usually happens within a few days or a week. Does that mean Arch Manning is going to commit, this weekend to Texas? It could. I don't know. They don't really talk to a lot of people, and that's fine. He went viral for a golf swing this weekend at his visit to Texas. And, other than that, I haven't heard a peep about a commitment. But yeah, you would think they would commit together. But I think the thought process here for the Randalls and the Mannings, and I'm just guessing, this is based on experience, is, okay, we don't want to commit together because then it looks like Will is a throw-in. So let's have Will have his commitment, make his own splash, and then have Arch commit a few weeks later. I think that might be the thought process here, and it's a smart thought process, because if Will Randall commits after Arch Manning, nobody cares.
Right.
And if he commits with Arch Manning, everybody says he's a throw-in. So let him commit first, and then let Arch have his, time in the sun. Not that he needs it. I mean, geez, everybody talks about him every second of every day, but let him commit, a month, a couple weeks after.
Obviously, Mike will keep you up to date on all things Arch Manning related. Again, social media, Farrell Sports, MikeFarrellSports.com, his YouTube channel. Check all that stuff out. Mike will have you up to date. And Mike, something you're doing now, particularly on your social handles, is you are doing lists. You're in the list business. You've had a few ones out recently, some provocative ones. You've got two that we want to cover tonight. We've got teams, we've got quarterbacks. Where do you want to start?
Let's do quarterbacks, because I think the teams is a little juicier and makes people a little bit more angry. So let's start with the quarterbacks. And I will tell you this, listen, I've been doing lists forever, right? That was kind of my thing back in the day at Rivals. It was, I was writing recruiting updates, and then I was doing, this, that, and the other, and ranking kids and all that stuff. But my 3-point stance went from sort of hard hitting, Hugh Freeze is cheating, to list, because the average consumer of content spends roughly 30 seconds on an article, and they just browse through it to see if there's anything of interest to them. They don't dive in that much to really well-written content. So I started doing lists. You're like, oh, here's 5 impact running backs in the Big Ten. Here's ranking the running back tiers in the SEC, blah, blah, blah. I've been doing it for 10 years. On social media, it started becoming popular. And I'm like, well, geez, I'm going to do it too. I mean, why not? I didn't think it would do this, though. It absolutely blew up. And Deion Sanders commenting about his son not being on the list, certainly helps. But before that, this thing was blowing up because everybody has an opinion. It brings in 50 schools to talk about, and everybody likes to yell. I put out the running back one today. We'll probably talk about that next week. 99% of the engagement was hate. And 99% of this engagement is hate, saying you suck, you don't know what you're talking about, and disagreeing. And then there's the 1% that say, oh, wow, I'm really happy you have, Hendon Hooker at number 5. He deserves that.
Well, yeah, let's go through this a little bit. I'll cherry pick a couple of these. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Again, for those of you listening audio-wise, this is Mike Farrell's top 50 QBs. You can find it on his social media page, Farrell Sports. If you're watching on YouTube, you see it in front of you. Easy enough for you, Mike. Number 1, Bryce Young. 2, CJ Stroud. What was the separator there between those two for you?
It was sort of like a toss of a coin. What I really looked at was that Bryce played the full season last year and CJ didn't. And Bryce won the Heisman. And CJ didn't. CJ is my number 1 quarterback for the NFL draft next year because he's 6'3" and Bryce is 5'11" on a good day. But when it comes to college football talent and quarterbacks, I just 1A and 1B right here. I mean, there was never any discussion in my head of Caleb Williams being number 1, but these two, 1A and 1B.
You mentioned Hendon Hooker. He's a Tennessee quarterback. He's at 5. What would you say to folks who think he's a system quarterback? He's a Josh Heupel, just fast, chuck the ball offense type of quarterback. I guess how did you get him at 5 versus some other guys? I
mean, fine by me if he puts up those numbers. I mean, 67% completion rate, 31 touchdowns, 3 picks. Be a system guy all you want. I thought Patrick Mahomes was a system guy. Sure. And he was taken 10th overall in the draft ahead of Deshaun Watson. I said, that's crazy. there's no way. I mean, Deshaun Watson beat Alabama. Deshaun Watson's, he's like a really, he's a guy you don't want to deal with in the fourth quarter. Patrick Mahomes is a system guy. He put up big numbers, blah, blah, blah. I was wrong. Maybe we're wrong about Hooker. He wasn't that good at Virginia Tech. He goes into Heupel's system. They don't have a ton of talent. It's not like he's throwing to 5-star wide receivers or, he's just efficient. I don't know if he'll have as good a season this year because now people will be sort of watching him on film and see what he does. But I can tell you this, Heupel's system's fun. They put up offensive numbers. And I think, we've seen the failure of Jarrett Garantano and some other quarterbacks at Tennessee. Hooker is the real deal, and that's why I have him at 5.
What about Will Levis at 6? What do you like about him there? Obviously, Kentucky quarterback, tough kid. What do you like about him at 6?
Arm. I mean, his arm makes him 6. If he had an average arm, he wouldn't be 6th. He's a dual threat quarterback. He's a physical kid. He was a first-year starter last year, put up some really good numbers, but had some bad games. But the arm is just ridiculous, what he can do with the football. And so this list is a combination of how good you are in college with how good you can be, and also your NFL potential. Scouts are just enamored with him because of his arm. He's going to be one of those guys. If he has a season like he did this year, he'll still be a first-round pick. If he takes the next step and cuts down on turnovers, so he could be the number 1 pick in the draft. So that's where he is at 6. And in contrast, Anthony Richardson at 26, who I think doesn't have the arm of Will Levis, but is a big, freaky, crazy athlete, just hasn't stayed healthy. He's a guy whose ceiling is super high as well. It's just the problem is I think he had 6 touchdowns and 5 picks last year. Yeah. So there's no way for me to justify having him higher than 26. Now, he could finish top 5 if he stays healthy. But, Will Levis actually has the numbers and the talent and the ceiling to be at number 6.
For years, Miami fans have been saying that they're back. They've never quite figured out that quarterback spot. Tyler Van Dyke, you have him checking at number 7. Had a good season last year, kind of came off the bench, although, a highly touted guy. Is he solid at 7? What kind of season do you expect out of TVD?
He's good. So here's the thing. There's been a lot of hype about the next, great Miami quarterback and the next great Miami team forever. This is even dated back to Kyle Wright, in the early 2000s. This guy's and Brad Kaya is one that I remember very, very specifically had a solid season, and everybody said, oh, he's going to be the next great one. He's Jim Kelly. Tyler Van Dyke is legit. He's real. I don't think he's going to regress. I don't think he's going to take a step backwards. I think he's going to be one of those guys that is in the discussion as a first-round draft pick for Miami. And I think the hype surrounding him won't be too much for him. He's a New England kid, fish out of water, but he has, sort of a Southern attitude. There's a confidence about him, not a cockiness, but just an assuredness of his ability. And I think, he's the real deal. If this were Brad Kaya, I wouldn't have put him 7th because I didn't believe in Brad Kaya taking that next step. I believe Tyler Van Dyke will take the next step. And by the next step, I mean, stay in the top 10.
Dillon Gabriel checks out at number 14. He's at Oklahoma now, former UCF quarterback, was at UCLA long enough to maybe grab a Jamba Juice and now reunites with his former offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby. Obviously, we've seen him play at UCF, put up some really big numbers under Heupel's system when Heupel was also at UCF. Transitioning to Oklahoma, though, new system, although he's familiar with it. What do you make of Dillon Gabriel? Where does he slot in terms of, can he trend upwards from 14 if they have a good season?
Yeah, he could. I mean, obviously, he could put up some big numbers. Oklahoma's a scary program. We just don't know what we're going to get. We're used to seeing what we're going to get under Bob Stoops and then Lincoln Riley. Now we don't know. Jeff Lebby is a tremendous offensive coach. He's going to have all the weapons he needs to be successful, despite the fact that they lost Mario Williams and Jordan Hasselwood. There's still a lot of talented wide receivers there for him. He's on this list of, I want to see how you come back. And Jurkovec is the same way at 12. You have a lot of potential. Now, Jurkovec, I think, has more NFL potential than Gabriel, but I want to see how you come back. Injuries are always part of things. They always change certain players, forever. And I just don't know if we're going to see that same guy that we saw at UCF put up those monster numbers. So people look at me and they're like, oh, Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma. I mean, he put up crazy numbers at UCF. He's going to put up insane numbers at Oklahoma. He could. That's why I got him so high, but I want to see it first.
Speaking of how do you come back, Spencer Rattler checks in at 16 now at USC, South Carolina. Obviously, we know his ups and downs at Oklahoma. Obviously, ends up getting replaced by Caleb Williams, transfers out. So under the Anthony Richardson motto, you didn't see a lot out of him last year. You really didn't see much out of Spencer Rattler either. And what you did see at times was really up and down. How does he get all the way to 16 on your board?
It's just talent again. He's got a magical arm. It's not Will Levis like crazy off platform, ridiculous. I could throw the ball in a bucket 80 yards away. It's more just mechanics are so smooth, throwing motion so effortless, the release is so quick. His problems are in his head. I mean, the attitude we saw in high school, him and Lincoln Riley butted heads at Oklahoma. I think Riley was sort of waiting to just yank him. And there's a reason why USC, pursued Caleb Williams and didn't even, have any interest in Spencer Rattler. But Shane Beamer was a guy who recruited him in Oklahoma. He's an offensive coach. They have a comfort level there. And he's got Austin Stogner coming with him, who's a big target from Oklahoma. I think he'll settle in. Now, South Carolina is not going to compete for any sort of SEC East title. But Rattler should have a bounce back year. But 16, if you were doing this list last June, he would be 1. He would have been my top guy. He would have been the Heisman favorite. He would have been the number 1 NFL draft pick. I had him in my head already wearing a Houston Texans helmet because I thought they would be the worst team, and I thought that they would pick him, and all of that fell apart. So he's got to prove it, but his talent level keeps him in the top 20.
Go to number 22, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, obviously much maligned at UCLA. Finally had a good season last year. Chip Kelly and that team put it together. He checks in at 22. What do you want to see from him this year? Where do you think he's at now? And does he have room to continue to grow?
He does. I wonder if we've seen his ceiling. I mean, he was a tremendous prospect coming out of Bishop Gorman. I remember 100 years ago when he wasn't even the starter. And he got offers, and I think there was a guy named Tate Martell ahead of him in high school, and he just never really took the next step. Now he took a good step next season, but I want to see more consistency. He's a guy who can look like a world beater, and he's got those running backs, and they've got a really good balanced offense. But then he can just have a couple games that you look at on film, and you're like, what is happening here? He needs that game in, game out consistency. His ceiling at the NFL level is mid-round guy, 5th round perhaps. I don't think he's a world beater, but in college football in a Chip Kelly system, he could certainly put up very good numbers, especially with that running game they've got. And, now that he's more comfortable in the system, I think UCLA is going to be a dangerous team that nobody's talking about in the Pac-12. Everybody's talking about Utah. Everybody's talking about Oregon. Everybody's talking about USC because of Lincoln Riley. UCLA, they're just sort of hanging in there and, waiting their turn and like, okay, talk about everybody else, but we're going to upset some teams.
Like, give me a name. So 26 through 50 has a bunch of transfer guys, some veteran guys. Give me a name 26 through 50 that you're looking at right now that you think has a legit chance to break into maybe that top 20 if he puts together a good season.
Spencer Sanders at 38 was low, and I struggled with it a little bit because you put him behind Adrian Martinez, who was, not very good at Nebraska, but Adrian Martinez is going to a much better roster at Kansas State. He's going to have a much better success rate there, I believe. Jaron Hall at BYU is another one who's, in the top 5 on many people's NFL draft list. I think both of those guys could certainly move up and be in the top 25. I mean, Spencer Sanders' ceiling and Jaron Hall's ceiling, both are top 15, maybe top 10. The guy nobody talks about is Frank Harris, who's just so exciting and fun to watch. He's at 32, and a lot of people, I had some people comment on my list is like, did you just make up Frank Harris as a gift to see if we're paying attention? No, he's a legit quarterback who could drive people crazy just at the group of 5 level. And then there's some guys on here like Bo Nix and Sean Clifford who could just easily fall off. Haynes King hasn't won the job yet. Bo Nix hasn't won the job yet. Tyler Buckner at 50 hasn't won the job yet. So this is going to change a lot. But those two, and Jake Haener, I guess, people like him a lot more than I do. I like him. But, people think he should be a top 10 quarterback. We're going to see, what happens with a new coach and, see if he can take it to the next level.
So who's a couple of guys outside looking in that you think can easily jump on this list, or you've got an eye on to maybe crack this top 50 if they start off really hot?
Well, I mean, obviously it depends on who wins jobs. It's Sean Clifford. James Franklin is extremely loyal to him. Drew Allar is a true freshman that looked good in the spring and is a guy that could potentially jump in here. J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, he could win that job over Cade McNamara. He was hurt for the spring, so we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him. He could win that job. And then, of course, you've got Thompson at Oregon, who's a 5-star. Ty Thompson at Oregon, who's a 5-star player, a very, very talented quarterback. If he wins the job there, they've got a lot of weapons around him. Max Johnson at Texas A&M could jump in here as well. It's going to be interesting because, LSU, I didn't have anybody. I don't have Miles Brennan. I don't have Jaden Daniels. They're both very good quarterbacks. I don't know who's going to win that job. Miles Brennan's been hurt. Jaden Daniels sort of regressed at Arizona State a little bit. One of those two guys could easily be on this list as well. So there's some big power programs that don't have anybody on this list that certainly could have guys on this list at the end of the season.
Are you planning a midseason update on this, Mike? Are you gonna what's the cadence gonna be as you think through this?
It's exhausting. I mean, I've seen people do them weekly. Like top 50 week 1 quarterback performers, and I got other stuff to do. I mean, I've got like other things to write. I got to follow recruiting. I got to follow NIL. I got to follow the transfer portal. I got to follow the NFL draft. I'll probably do another one of these, before the season starts, because we'll know, we'll have a better idea. I mean, Quinn Ewers at 27 hasn't played. He might lose the job to Hudson Card, and so I have to revamp this. DJ could lose the job to Kublik at Clemson. I have to revamp this before the season starts, before week 1, and then probably do a midseason, then do a postseason.
All right, so let's leave the quarterbacks there. Check Mike's Twitter account, his social media stuff, his website for those updates closer to fall camp, Mike. But 15 teams that aren't scary anymore. So these teams are always thinking they're backlist, and Mike's here to tell you that these are 15 teams that probably aren't really back yet, Mike. Yeah. Obviously, a lot of powerhouse teams on this list. Checking in at number 1 is Nebraska. What do they do to earn or unearn, I don't know how to phrase that, the mantle as the top team that's not really scary anymore?
Well, it's tough. I mean, you look at most recent national championships, but you look at also most recent seasons. I mean, they're a 3-9 football team. I know they lost a lot of games by 1 score last year. I know they won 10 games a year under Bo Pelini, a while back, and were a solid football team. I know they probably got robbed of the Big 12 title against Texas in whatever year that was, 2009. I don't even remember. But they've never come close to being who they were when they scared everybody, when they were just winning national championships and putting out Heisman winners and, just rolling up scores on people that were good football teams and beating them by 40. So I gave them the nod over Texas because Texas has been more relevant. You could make an argument that if Colt McCoy didn't get hurt, they would have won the national championship against Alabama a long time ago. Vince Young and USC, we still remember that game, sort of. And then Florida State is the team on here with the most recent national championship. But Jimbo Fisher kind of ran that program into a ditch, and they're really struggling to get out of it. And then there's some teams on here that people are like, oh, they've never been good. They've never been scary. I've never been scared of West Virginia. I've never been scared of Washington, or I've never been scared of Stanford or Syracuse. Well, yeah, teams were. I mean, West Virginia with Pat White was scary as scary could get. Stanford under Andrew Luck was scary. Washington, I can see the argument here a little bit. They made the playoff a few years ago, but, way back when, they were a national title winner. And Syracuse with Graves and McNabb in the old Big East days were super scary as well. So, 15 probably might have been too deep, because you could certainly leave off Syracuse, Louisville, Virginia Tech, Stanford. But, those were some scary teams, especially West Virginia, the Slayton, Devine, Pat White. I mean, that was nobody wanted to play them, and they were an upset loss to Pitt away from playing for a national championship, if I remember correctly.
Got Tavon Austin there as well. Let's talk about Nebraska for just a second. What has happened there? Scott Frost he could walk on water when he left UCF to go to Nebraska. Everyone thought this was home run. Here we are a few years later. He's reworking contracts so he can basically keep his job another year. Jettisons his entire offensive staff. Is it just going to not work out for him in Nebraska? Are we just kind of the march down the aisle of divorce for Nebraska and Scott Frost?
We'll see. I mean, if you can go from 3-9 and the difficult losses, by one score or less to, or 10 points or less to teams like Oklahoma and Michigan and Ohio State, and you could turn those into wins and you can go perhaps 8-4, then he's going to stay because that's the next trajectory. What's happened in Nebraska is national recruiting occurred. And everybody started being able to recruit across the country. Social media occurred. All of these things that came into place, where back in the old days, where you recruited geographically and based on reputation, a lot of kids took one visit and made their decision. Now kids take multiple visits. Now 7-on-7 teams travel all over the country. And, it's just a different world than it was back then when Nebraska was loading up on, big offensive linemen and talented quarterbacks and, great running backs. You can't do that anymore because now, logistically, just to get to Nebraska is more difficult than it is, or it's about the same difficulty as it was where it's easier to get to other places now. So they just, the college football world just caught up to them. That happens. That didn't happen with Miami. There's problems at Miami that, bad hires. Larry Coker wasn't a great, replacement for Butch Davis. And then Randy Shannon wasn't ready and Al Golden was bad. And then that Devin Shapiro scandal. There's reasons why, Miami or Penn State or some of those teams aren't scary anymore. For Nebraska, it's simply geography, change of conference. And, everybody in college football kind of caught up to them because they could recruit nationally.
I know you're high on USC. I think obviously my assumption would be that you think that if obviously Lincoln's system hits, Caleb hits, Jordan Addison is there, they could be a team that's easily scary pretty quickly here in this upcoming season. But what about Florida? I mean, they're a team that's kind of been up and down. Billy Napier's come in there, and by all accounts, he's absolutely just gutted the department and revolutionized what they've done. They've kind of reimagined everything they've worked on. He brought in a Saban-esque style model and staff and all that kind of a blueprint there. He's getting some kids to commit there, but obviously he's still kind of a younger coach in his first big Power 5 job. Where do you see Florida right now? Are they trending up, trending down, or where would you point the arrow?
Well, Florida's a real interesting one because obviously USC is trending up. They were 4-8, right? Florida played for the SEC championship and was a touchdown away from winning it in 2020. So they haven't fallen. They won the SEC East twice under Jim McElwain. The problem is the Urban Meyer, multiple national championships and the recruiting level he was at has never been matched, since Muschamp was the successor and all that stuff. So it's hard to see what trajectory they're on. I mean, I don't think a Florida program can continue to be bad, but look at Texas. I mean, I didn't think Texas could continue to be bad. So I would put the 3 teams on this list that I think can be scary quicker than the rest. I think USC, obviously, with Riley and NIL, Miami with Cristobal because he's a great fit and NIL, and Florida simply because it's Florida. They should have been recruiting better under McElwain. They should have been recruiting better under Mullen. Neither of those guys were good recruiters. Neither of those guys cared about recruiting. Napier does. And I think he will recruit better. And if they do put that together off the field, it could translate into something on the field. So they're even right now. It's a wait and see. Billy Napier is 0-0 as a Power 5 coach. So I want to see what's happening. Whereas Cristobal we've seen, Lincoln Riley we've seen.
Let's talk Auburn and Brian Harsin. They check in at number 10 on your list. Obviously, kind of an up and down season for Harsin. Lost a bunch of kids in the portal. Alabama, it being in your conference in your backyard does not help. Where do you kind of project Auburn to go at this point? I mean, a lot of folks, I don't know if you were included, kind of scratch your head at Harsin as the initial hire. Again, I don't know that we say he's gotten out of the gates hot there at Auburn, but it is Auburn. It's SEC. It's fertile recruiting territory. Do you see any chance that he turns that thing around?
No, because I think it's just that relationship is forever damaged. I mean, the boosters tried to get him out. He stayed. So if he's successful in 1 year, then he's going to be a hot name and a hot coach for someone else, and he's probably going to jump. And if he's not successful, the boosters are definitely going to get him out. So, it's a really difficult situation for everybody to be in. He wasn't the first choice. He wasn't the fifth choice. They weren't embarrassing last year, but some of the hires he made that didn't pan out very quickly, and not having a quarterback, I mean, that's kind of a situation for them. I just don't see them under him being successful. Now, Auburn is a program that can be successful without a doubt. They've got a great fan base. They're in Alabama. They can recruit Georgia extremely well because they're bordering up against it, and they can recruit Florida also. But I just think that the start he got off of is a hole that's going to be hard to dig out of.
Again, that's Mike Farrell's top 15 teams that aren't scary anymore. You can find all that stuff on social media, Twitter, Farrell Sports, obviously website, MikeFarrellSports.com. All that stuff is there. You can take a look. Mike wants the interaction, so comment. Let him know what you think. If you think he's an idiot, tell him he's an idiot. Think he's a genius, tell him he's a genius. Let him know how you feel about the list. Mike, I want to start something on the show, and since I haven't done this yet, I'll take the first mantle. I want to do an Ask Mike segment. Each week, maybe take a couple questions from some viewers, some listeners. So if you want to shoot those my way at Sports by Adam or at Sons of UCF, or give them to Mike directly, we'll save some time at the end of every show. Maybe ask Mike some questions, Mike. So I've got one for you to kick it off. Since I get to be on the microphone, I'll ask you, what's the kid, or who's the player that you've been most surprised at a school he committed to? Again, we talked earlier about Ruben Owens to Louisville. In your career, who's the one kid committed someplace that you went, just what in the heck is going on there? And did that commitment actually stick?
Oh, that's a tough one because there have been so many surprises over the years. Obviously, we just had one with Travis Hunter going to Jackson State, but we're in an NIL world. That would be the most stunning one because he was committed to Florida State, and then he was supposed to go to Georgia. And then on signing day, there started to be rumors about him going to Jackson State. And, for a 5-star player to go to a non-FBS program is really, really weird in my mind. But NIL and all this other stuff is come into play. Deontay Greenberry, who had committed to Notre Dame, flipped and went to Houston because of his relationship with the wide receiver coach at Houston. He didn't have a great career. He stuck, the commitment stuck, but a lot of people at Notre Dame are still like, what could he have been at Notre Dame? That was a really surprising one. Ed Oliver going to Houston. That was kind of interesting to me because, everybody thought this kid's got 50 Power 5 offers. Why is he going to go group of 5? But, those are the ones that sort of stand out. Cyrus Quandro choosing Auburn. I think he chose them accidentally on SportsCenter. I mean, not on SportsCenter, but on ESPN national television because his brother Ari was, already at Alabama. And he was going to go to Alabama, and everybody knew he was going to go to Alabama. And then he said Auburn on TV, and then he looked physically ill after. And I heard he got physically ill after. And then he didn't sign his letter. And then there was all this talk about where's he going to go. And I followed that one for 3 days after signing day. I remember in Connecticut here, there was a blizzard. We had like 20 inches of snow, and I'm talking on the phone, trying to shovel my driveway, trying to track down Cyrus Quandro because I knew he was going to in Alabama. I just think he said they're on TV. So there's a lot of weird stories like that, but Deontay Greenberry kind of pops into my head. It was very rare for a kid with that many offers, who had committed to Notre Dame to drop down to the group of 5 level. And it's not like Houston was killing it, as far as a program.
All right, last one. You travel around, you've been around a lot of college football. The best tailgate scene belongs to which school?
That's a tough one. I mean, they're so cool. There's so many of them. The first thing that comes to mind is South Carolina.
Okay.
the Cockaboose and all that. Like, it was one of the earliest ones I went to when I first started getting into, because at Rivals, when we first launched into a subscription model, I ran the South Carolina site, the Virginia Tech site, the Virginia site, the Rutgers site, the Boston College site, and I forget what else. And I didn't really know a whole lot about South Carolina. The reason I ran it is because Lou Holtz was the coach. I had a connection to him. I knew a lot of the assistant coaches. And I learned a lot about South Carolina football that I didn't know. Like, they sold out every game when they were 0-11 one season, and all this stuff. And I kept being told about the tailgating in Columbia. And when I saw it for myself, I'm like, wow, this is a team that's not a national title contender. I mean, under Holtz and under Spurrier, they went to some New Year's bowls and stuff like that, and they won the SEC East, I think, once. But it's just amazing. And then I saw every other SEC team, and it's similar. But that one stands out to me just because that was my first real experience in SEC tailgating.
All right, again, if you have a question for Ask Mike, find me on social media at Sports by Adam or at Sons of UCF, or you can hit up Mike himself. We'll try to carve some time out each week. Put Mike on the hot seat. This guy knows enough about everything. He's an encyclopedia of college football, and I suspect he knows a lot about other sports as well. So let's give Mike some tough questions, make him sweat, make him earn this experience here.
Ask me about baseball. Ask me about football. Hockey. Ask me about anything. I don't know a lot about each. But it's more fun for me to get questions about non-college football stuff than it is anything else. NFL even. I talk college football. I think college football every second of every day. So ask me questions about something that's not college football. That would be interesting.
Challenge extended from Mike Farrell. This, again, has been another edition of the Mike Farrell Sports Show. Again, follow Mike Farrell at MFarrell Sports on both Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you get to his website, MikeFarrellSports.com. Find the YouTube channel, Mike Farrell Sports. Hit that subscribe button. Anytime Mike puts a video up there, that means it goes directly into your feed. You don't have to search for it. You don't have to ask a friend. It's literally right there for you. Couldn't be easier. And make sure you subscribe to the Mike Farrell Show on the Believe Podcast Network. Mike, what's coming up this week on Mike Farrell Sports? Tease some pieces coming up or some things people can look forward to.
So we're definitely going to delve into this Ryan Day wide receiver recruiting, and who are the best programs to recruit wide receivers, and who are the best coaches offensively that recruit in college football right now. Because Nick Saban, you take him out of the picture when you say offensively, because he's a defensive coach. Yes, he recruits 5-star wide receivers and 5-star everything. But is it Dabo? Is it Ryan Day? Who are the offensive? Is it Sark? Who are the offensive guys that can recruit the best skill talent? And we're going to be looking into a little bit about Ohio State. Are they, have they become wide receiver U? We're going to talk about, obviously, a lot of the commitments that are going to be coming up. Maybe Arch Manning, who knows? But the running back list just went out, the top 50 running back list today. So now I got to delve into the wide receivers. Those are very time consuming, fun, but man, I'll tell you what, every one of them is going to have one mistake, right? So the last one, I forget what the mistake was in the quarterback one, just because proofreading 50, you're going to get somebody's name spelled wrong, or you're going to have somebody's, what it was is my graphics guy put Buckner and Jeff Sims. They were 49 and 50, and he put Georgia Tech and Notre Dame logos in the wrong place. So put that out on Instagram, because I like to try Instagram first, because it's a very young and violently immature crowd, just to see. And that's the first thing they noticed. Today it was I misspelled Devin Akane at Texas A&M. His name was spelled wrong. And everybody jumped on me and said, you should stop covering sports. You're a piece of garbage. So the time that goes into these, and still knowing there's going to be one mistake, it's almost like, what do they call that in movies? Where they put a little something in there that only like diehards would know about. I forget what it's called. That's what to watch for next week in my wide receiver one. I'm going to purposely now make a mistake. And I want to see which jerk, idiot, moron, immature loser points it out first.
And we love you all for listening and tuning in and watching. Again, make sure you find Mike everywhere that Mike is available to be found. This wraps up for another week, Mike. Appreciate you having me back. We will be back, maybe even better than ever. Who knows, next week on the Mike Farrell Sports Show. So until then, everybody, take care of yourselves. Make sure you follow Mike, and we'll talk soon.